Hello, I'm Meg Fregoso, a nurse practitioner and lung transplant coordinator from Inova Fairfax Hospital in Virginia, and I'm co-moderating today's program with Brittany Coons. We would like to welcome you to the ISHLT Nursing and Allied Health Professional Community Webinar presented jointly with the Early Career Trainee Committee. The 10 ISHLT professional communities are the gathering place for the professional specialties that make up the care teams for our patients. Each ISHLT professional community is represented on the 4 ISHLT interdisciplinary steering committees: advanced heart failure and transplantation, advanced lung failure and transplantation, mechanical circulatory support, and pulmonary vascular disease, CTEP and PAH. The ISHLT professional community webinars are free and open to all with an interest. If you are not a member of ISHLT, please consider joining this unique international interdisciplinary society. If you are already a member, thank you for making the organization what it is. If you would like to join or get more involved in ISHLT, you can contact anyone at ISHLT headquarters through the website. We hope to see you at the ISHLT annual meeting in Denver, April 19th through the 22nd. I want to highlight 3 areas of the ISHLT annual meeting relevant to the people on our webinar: the 2023 ISHLT Academy Masterclass in Nursing and Allied Health, crucial transitions in the care of the heart and lung transplant and MCS patient, is April 18th, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. This is the Tuesday before the meeting begins on Wednesday. For early career attendees, there are lightning sessions on grants and career issues Thursday morning, and a Meet the Expert session Friday at 6:15. And for Nursing Allied Health, we have a networking meeting Thursday, April 20th, and we hope to see you all there. We want to thank all of our speakers in advance for sharing their expertise. Please post any questions you have in the chat box, and we will answer at the end of our hour. Please remain muted as we are recording the webinar. Let's get started.
Great, so we're excited to have our speakers today. As Meg said, my name is Brittany Coons. I'm an assistant professor at Villanova University, and I'm a clinical nurse at the University of Pennsylvania. And I serve as the Nursing and Allied Health representative to the Early Career and Trainee Committee. So we're super excited to have you here today as you start to plan for the ISHLT meeting. I think this will be super helpful for everyone. So we have 4 presentations planned for you. And to kick it off, we're going to start with Sarah Shettle, who's going to talk about tips and tricks for designing and preparing your oral presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Brittany, and thank you all for joining. I saw at the beginning here, I think we have 44 attendees, which is wonderful, and hopefully even more. I know this is being recorded, so I'm excited that so many people are interested in hoping to improve and learn some skills to be able to prepare for their maybe first or subsequent presentations at upcoming ISHLT conferences here. So I've been tasked with reviewing oral presentations. And I remember when I gave my first oral presentation, I was nervous. I thought, oh my gosh, you know, there's going to be so many people from all around the country and all around the world. I want to make sure that I do a good job of this, but I didn't really know exactly where to start. And I was thankful to be able to have a lot of wonderful mentors to be able to help guide me through the process. So the following slides are going to be a bit of things I've learned and hopefully things that might help you as you go through this process yourself. So we'll go over where to start, what to do next, some tips, and then some resources for you. So first of all, if you are giving an oral presentation, huge congratulations. That's a very big deal. Being able to give an oral talk at any conference means that not only was your abstract considered to be great, but it was at a merit higher than the level of a poster. And so that means that people are interested in what it is that you are researching and excited to hear it. So you want to make sure that you do your very best job to present this information in a way that is useful and meaningful and conveys your research and the highlights to the rest of the community. So where to start? So one of the things, and then hopefully this slide makes you kind of look back a little bit too. And one thing important on formatting and templates that's worth noting is that you'll receive some content in advance of ISHLT to help you with this. Now, hopefully, in looking at this slide, the colors, the fonts, everything is a little bit off. This slide doesn't look very good. Ideally, what you want to do is consider things like the lighting, the slide color, the color choices. Some colors will blend well better than others. And so really considering that when you're putting together your presentation, usually conferences will have a theme of colors. So if their theme is yellow, you probably don't want yellow text, for instance, if it's going to blend in with that. So considering what that might look like, you can practice with those templates and with different colors. That will hopefully help your presentation pop and convey your message without detracting from those slides. Another important thing is that you use those slide templates, because if you use your own templates, you may actually not choose the right size slide. So there's different sizes of slides. And if you use the wrong size slides when you're creating an oral presentation and then it's converted to the slide format for the conference, it may jumble your words together. It may reformat your tables. And so it's really important to try to use the formatted options that are available through the conference. The other thing you want to think about too is who is your audience, the size of your room, all of those sorts of things are going to be helpful in thinking through, what you want to all include. Is this going to be primarily an allied health cohort? Is it going to be allied health and physician staff? Is it going to include surgeons? What might they be interested in hearing or learning from your research? So once you've nailed down at least the slides and you've kind of got a sense of colors, what do you actually put in those slides, or what are some slides that you would be that you should consider at least for inclusion? And an important thing is usually all conferences will require you to have a disclosure slide. Even if you don't have any disclosures, it's still useful to put that slide in and to say you don't have disclosures. You're also going to want to give the audience some sort of a introduction to what it is that you're presenting. Usually this is in the context of a purpose or an introduction or a background type of slide that gives the audience some information into what it is that you've been researching, similar to the abstract that you would have presented for consideration to get your oral presentation accepted. It's useful to go through methods so people can understand the process that you went through in performing the research, and then also including different tables and figures that were developed during the course of your presentation. Those can also help you explain your results. And I think including figures is much more engaging for audiences, including the figures and then speaking to those figures and explaining what they explain and what conclusions can be drawn from that. A lot of times individuals will have a conclusion slide just to highlight those key points that you're hoping to convey from your oral presentation. And I think it's always nice to include a thank you slide. Usually none of us have gotten into the point of having an oral presentation by ourselves. There are usually other people on our team. And making sure that you give credit where credit is due, I think is always a good practice. And sometimes somebody may hear your presentation and think, gosh, this is a really great idea. I'd love to ask Susan more questions about her research, or ask Thomas, how he came up with, XYZ content. And so sometimes including contact information at the end of your talk can be helpful for people that are interested in learning more or contacting you about your talk. A couple of key points with regard to figures and tables. Really keep in mind the font size. I think sometimes there's this temptation to include every possible item in those figures and tables. And if the font size is so small that you're going to struggle to see it on a slide, that's probably going to be lost on the audience. So really trying to think about which pieces are going to be most useful for the audience, and even highlighting or including things to draw the audience's attention to the key portions of figures or tables can be helpful. Arrows or boxes or color can really help in drawing attention to the relevant areas of your figures and tables, particularly if you have more content in them. Again, I know I said there's the temptation to include a lot of information, but very often less is more. In these contexts, you don't want to have a slide that has 50 different bullet points with 3 different tables. Cramming all that much information into a slide is likely going to be overwhelming for the audience to receive. So fewer bullet points are usually preferred over more. Also, I think that sometimes people find animations to be humorous, and if that's kind of your personality and you include a few of those, that might be up to you. But I would avoid excessive animations or having your content or your your slide information or your text come through in like a spirally format or an explosion onto your slide. Having it be simple and professional is really a good choice, especially for a conference. Also, you want to consider the number of slides that you have. If you have a 7-minute oral presentation, you probably shouldn't be having 50 slides, because that will be stressful to try to get through that many slides in that period of time, and you probably won't be able to do justice to the content on those slides in that time frame. I think that also speaks to the importance of practicing. You don't want to just develop all these slides and then send them off and in hope that you'll be able to make it through the presentation without having gone through it at least several times. One important exception to the less is more rule, I think, is to ensure that abbreviations are understood. Particularly if you work in a specialty or a subspecialty, abbreviations that might be common to you may not be common to the audience. So really making sure that the audience is aware of what those abbreviations stand for before you start to use them during your presentation is helpful. So what are some tips to think about? Well, you really want to make sure that you're overviewing and going through, your slides and what they look like. You don't want to be, having a grammar, mistake and have, a comma instead of a period or little things like that. Spell check, make sure that your words are what you are intending them to be, and that there wasn't some sort of an autocorrect in your processing software. I think that it's a good idea whenever you're able to create the content far in advance of the presentation, and then to review that content after a period of time has elapsed, and you can look at it again with fresh eyes to see, are there things that you like, that you want to change, perhaps that you want to modify, and asking other people to review your presentation as well, particularly if this is one of your first or second presentations, because others that have done this before might have some valuable feedback. I also think there's a temptation sometimes to memorize the presentation, to memorize every single bullet point on the slide. And I think that can be challenging. For one, if you forget one particular piece, I think then that can be stressful or overwhelming in the middle of a presentation. So instead of memorizing all of the content, I find it to be much more useful to memorize key points that you want to make sure that you're covering during the course of the presentation and speaking to those key points rather than essentially giving a speech of memorized content. I think it comes across as much more conversational with the audience rather than just having something that's memorized. If you're nervous, you're standing up in front of a large audience, sometimes just looking at people's foreheads instead of their eyes looks like you're giving eye contact, but then maybe it's a little bit less nerve-wracking. So if looking at people's eyes or faces makes you nervous, look at their foreheads, and probably nobody's going to be able to know the difference. Practice, practice, practice. This is one of these things where the more that you do this, the easier it will become. So you don't want the very first run through of your presentation to be on the stage at ISHLT in front of an audience. You want to have practiced this in front of colleagues or peers or people who can be kind and gentle and give you feedback before your first presentation is in front of the audience. So seeking feedback and critique is very helpful. If you've gone through all of this and you think, oh my gosh, I would love to run it by, other people are looking for more resources as I develop my content. Here is a list of all of the people on our team. You've seen some of them here already in introductions. Any one of us would be more than happy to help you or look through things if there's questions that you might have. And obviously you've joined here, so you can ask your question in person, or if you haven't been able to join and you're listening to this later, all of our contact information is available through ISHLT. So feel free to reach out to any of us. In addition, there's a lot of links that have been developed by ISHLT to help guide you through these different processes and to connect you with other people that have been through this before and that are more than happy to help you. So I've included links for ISHLT, also for the conference, for ISHLT Connect and NHSAH, which are all great groups. And I'd highly recommend, even if you use these to get more involved, I think they're also great points to connect and also just to stay abreast of current topics in your field. So with that, I'd like to thank you. As you can see, here's my contact information. So if any of you want to reach out to me, feel free to email me. Otherwise, with that, thank you so much. I'd be happy to take questions at the end, and I'll look forward to hopefully seeing several of you on this presentation here at Denver at ISHLT in 2023.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was wonderful. So now we're going to move on to poster presentations, and Melissa Cusiano is going to help us with that. She's going to talk about poster presentation success, tips and tricks for developing an engaging poster presentation.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. As Brittany said, I'm Melissa Cousineau. I'm an associate professor of pediatrics and cardiac surgery at the University of Michigan, where I work as a pediatric transplant psychologist. And I've also had the privilege of being on the program planning committee for Denver's ISHLT meeting. And so I have gotten a sneak peek at so many of your excellent abstracts so far. So I'm really excited to see them all in person in Denver. I also serve on the Standard and Guidelines Committee for ISHLT. So, all right. So we are going to blitz through preparing your poster abstract, much like Sarah did with the oral presentation, to ensure we have lots of time for question and discussion. I want to touch quickly on conference guidelines related to preparing your poster, highlight the main components of a poster presentation. I, like Sarah did, talk about some tips and tricks, and end with some discussion of what to expect on presentation day. Oh, I went the wrong way. All right, so you should have already received this upon receiving notice of your accepted abstract from Susie and from ISHLT, the instructions for preparing your poster. And so certainly, I think it's very helpful to start here. So many times, I think people start with a past poster they have maybe created and then realize that the display board or the orientation is completely different for this conference. And so you can lose time by doing that. So I think important to know that this is a vertical display board in Denver, and it is no more than 4 feet wide by 7 feet tall for your actual poster. And so there's a lot of opportunity for you to maximize space and design here. And then per the ISHLT guidelines, you want to make sure that you have your title and your authors very clearly displayed on your poster, as well as these main components. So your introduction, your methods, your results, conclusion, all coming from the abstract that you already had submitted and accepted from the ISHLT. And then much like your oral presentations, posters should also be clear, simple, thinking about design elements and how to really maximize readability and attention to your poster. And most importantly, the important results and kind of implications you are wanting to highlight. And so these are the main components of a poster. So as we've already talked about, your title, your co-authors, and oftentimes people will include the affiliations or, institutions of the authors participating in that research. Again, taking from your abstract that was already accepted, you want to make sure you include the purpose of this study. This can include things like a little bit of background literature in your area, as well as your study aims or objectives. You'll also want to make sure you comment on the methods, again, coming from that abstract. So this would include things like your study sample, your measures, your outcomes, your results. You want to be sure that these are what you reported in your abstract. So I think this is a really important piece. Sometimes people, we submit a study, it's accepted, and then we recruit another 10 participants or 20 participants between that time that it was accepted, as an abstract or submitted as an abstract, and then we're actually at the conference. But it's important that we're actually reporting the results that were submitted as part of that accepted abstract. Now, tables, figures, and images, these may not have been things that you initially included in that abstract submission. And this is really where you have an opportunity to bring viewers to your poster, to really highlight your findings. And so we'll give some examples of some tables and figures that you might see in posters. I think the discussion section is a really important part of an abstract. I know that when I'm looking around and looking at posters, really one of the biggest things I'm interested in is what's the takeaway? What are the implications of this research? How does this inform our work as transplant clinicians? What might be the next steps from this research? And so again, an opportunity where you can probably expand upon from what you submitted in that initial abstract. And then just like the oral presentation, it is required by ISHLT that you include any disclosures, including funding sources on your poster as well. So here's a few examples here. You know, these were largely printed posters, so you may not be able to see, you know, the text very close here in PowerPoint form, but I wanted to just give some examples of previous posters my lab or team has presented at ISHLT. You can see this one, you know, we've got the background section, our objectives, our methods, and really spent kind of the bulk of our poster space highlighting our results with, you know, catching images, figures, and tables. We've included our disclosures and acknowledgements here at the bottom. This is another example of a poster. You know, many posters are moving into these more visual abstract forms nowadays, which I think again is to help kind of catch viewers when they're walking through poster halls, and there's many posters. So using more images, really reducing the amount of text to get main messages apart, but still having all of the main components. So on this section here, we kind of go through what our aims were, as well as our methods. You can see how many patients, surveys we use, and then this whole section really dedicated to kind of our results and our main implications, with the most important thing we would want someone to walk away from right here, kind of in this big text. Again, we have our disclosures down at the bottom. And then another, I think, a little bit more traditional type poster. Again, you can see a lot of emphasis on the results, the figures, the tables, and really trying to bring viewers to the posters. So this is an example of perhaps a not so good poster from Better Posters, which is a website where they can also give you some input on your posters. And you see here that really, I think the main takeaways are that there's just a lot of text. Things are really crammed. This looks like perhaps a manuscript worth of text fit into this poster. And so really trying to kind of reduce all of this small, fine text to make sure that people are stopping to read about your important work. On presentation day, I think we might have, hold on, did we skip past one? Oh, tips and tricks. I'm sorry, I passed right through this. There are a number of programs that you can use for developing your poster. I think many tend to use Microsoft PowerPoint, although Canva is what I've used to make this oral presentation, and has some really nice already templated posters available, and certainly some use Adobe as well. I think some nice things to include and think about are perhaps including a QR code now on your poster, and this can link to your research lab, your website, your contact information. It can be really nice for people walking by. They want to learn more about your work or more about you, and they can simply kind of link right to that through a QR code. You can generate these freely now through the web. Sometimes people will bring and print handouts of their poster, so you know, a PDF version. If available, including your Twitter handle, your email. I think this allows for more sharing of your research, and you can certainly tag ISHLT as well to get your posters shared more widely in the community. And then just know that in Denver, posters will need to be mounted before 9:30 a.m. You'll get a number assigned and it will come to you before April 3rd. And there will be push pins on site, so no one has to travel with, you know, needles or pins in their suitcases. They will be available for you to hang things up. All right, and then on presentation day, you'll be expected to stand near your poster for the hour session. There's often, you know, drinks, cocktails, snacks, things of that sort available. I highly recommend you go and perhaps get something for yourself to know, join in kind of the socializing that will happen during the poster presentation. There will be poster discussants also, you know, coming through the poster hall to engage with people about their poster and about their work. And so certainly be expecting that. And I think it's really important to, you know, kind of proactively invite and engage people, you know, with your poster. So oftentimes if someone's walking by, I'll say, let me know if you have any more questions, or if I see someone kind of looking through my poster, I'll say, I'm happy to give you a few takeaway points, and really use this opportunity, I think more than anything else, to network. I've met, people who I've collaborated with on research, and people who have emailed me about program development through, presenting at the ISHLT Poster Day. And with that, that is all I have. We can talk more about this at the end.
Thanks so much, Melissa. That was wonderful. So now we're going to move on to our third presentation, and Christiane's going to present on traveling internationally. So some tips and tricks for presenting abroad, which many of you may be doing this year or next year in Prague. So go ahead and take it away.
Okay, let me try. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So traveling internationally, some tricks and tips for presenting abroad. And this might be something special because to travel internationally might require an extra proportion of preparations. Before we go into content, please let me take a look at what happened. You have your abstract being accepted, or you are invited to speak at an international conference meeting. That's a big deal. So be proud of yourself and be proud of your accomplishment and share it. So share it with your colleagues, share it with your boss, share it with friends, share your excitement. There are a few tips and tricks presenting abroad, and perhaps some of them are for those being or having paranoia like I do, at least sometimes, and some are for everyone. Essentials when we start to prepare our presentation. So it's what Sarah said already. Start with the 4 A's. So what is the aim? What are the objectives? Not just for your presentation, but what are the aims for the presentation of the entire session, and what's the aims for the entire Congress meeting? This aim will lead you to the audience. So with the audience being nurses, being an interprofessional audience. So it rises and leads to the third A, be awareness. And that will help to guide, to develop your presentation and to articulate what's your key point. Before you go, have the presentation revised by a native speaker, have it spell checked, have it grammar checked. We all are different with respect to our personality. So one of the tips would be to know yourself and how you present best. Some need to have an entire script to present, specifically when your language is not the native one. Some need some bullet points. Others have just the first few slides being prepared in sentences, and then it flows. Others told me that they need some phrases to transition them from one slide to the next, from one topic to the next. So be sure you know yourself and how you present best, and use these skills which work best for you. Presentation file on more than one device. That's what I always do when traveling. So I have the presentation sent to my inbox. I know that it's there. I have it on a thumb drive, but I know that a thumb drive might be lost, it might break, or it might have something else might happen. So I have everything, every presentation on more than one device. and I have the final version of the presentation on my device. Before traveling, what's important for international travelers is that your passport, your ID is valid. And for traveling into the States, into North America, it's a requirement that your passport is valid for another 3 or even 6 months, depending on where you come from. What else I do, and always would recommend doing that, is flying in early. So I always count in some buffer time, because flying is always associated with some uncertainty. So there is some delays, there is some flights even being canceled, at least here over in Europe. We have lots of airline crews and ground staff being on strike for better working conditions. So to check in for the flight and to count in some buffer time might ensure that you are there for your presentation and that you can travel without having stress while traveling. What I always recommend is to check on weather conditions and the climate, specifically when you travel across the transatlantic. And also to give myself or yourself, if you do it, some time to adjust to the climate and the time zone. That helps you to be at your best for your presentation. Having arrived at the meeting site, what I always do is I walk the way between the hotel and the Congress Center. And I check not just the way, but also the time I need. And I try to orient myself within the Congress Center. Specifically, count into time for the speaker radio room. In the speaker radio room, the AV technicians will help you to transfer your presentation and to deliver it to the right session and to the right session room. Again, have the device, have the final version of your presentation, and check being in the speaker radio room, the presentation before it is uploaded, and check it specifically for any changes in formatting, symbols, signs, or numbers. So being at the meeting, a few more tips for those being paranoid. A successful presentation requires a business attire. My recommendation is always to have some business attire which makes you feel comfortable so that you really can focus on the content instead of your attire. Some of my friends and colleagues recommend to use and check your blood glucose level and to have some glucose enhancing like a juice or a granola bar before going up the stage. Also, what helps me to reduce my stress levels is to check on the location and the session room during a break before the session. I try to take a look at the podium, the lectern, the microphone, and the pointer, just to familiarize myself with the environment and to spend the valuable time for my presentation really for the content. So a few tips for what happens at the stage at the podium, and these are tips which have been given to me by a professional actress a couple of years ago. And what she taught me was that when we arrive at the podium, we should take a moment to read ourselves. So really to put consciously our feet on the ground and to take at least 2 deep breaths in and out and in and out. And while doing so, take in our audience. Then start with your presentation and start with a smile. These few phrases might be helpful, specifically for those of us being non-native, to have a little break for the discussion section. And they might be helpful to really give ourselves a moment to think about the question, to think about that comment, and to create our answer, What follows the discussion section is some time for discussions at the end of the section. And that's a period of time where I always try to write down the questions and the comments, because of the presentation is before writing up the manuscript. And these questions and comments might be very, very valuable of developing the manuscript draft or to guide the discussion section. So that brings me to an end. Hopefully you enjoy your first presentation. And I do look forward to seeing you soon at the ISHLT meeting in Denver. Thanks for your attention.
Thanks so much, Christiane. That was great. And now we're going to move on to our last presentation. Thomas is going to talk to us about the clinical case reports, which is a unique category that's exclusive to early career and trainee members. So go ahead, Thomas.
Okay, so Brittany, thanks for the introduction, and it's really a pleasure for me to present here today about the clinical case reports, tips and tricks for the early career professionals. And I have to mention, I'm neither a early career researcher, and I think I'm also not young, but still I'm looking forward to this presentation today. So what are the objectives of today? So first of all, I would like to define the purpose of scientific research and also clinical academic case report posters. And second, would like to discuss the rules and the requirements of creating an ISHLTv poster, which will be a little bit redundant to the previous talks. And then last but not least, to provide sample components and tips of creating, but specifically, and I think this is a little bit different to our first presentation of today, creating a clinical case report poster. So let's get started. What is actually the purpose of a poster presentation? So I think posters are a legitimate and also a popular presentation format for research and also for clinical case reports. They really efficiently communicate concepts and data, and we heard this already before, based on a combination of visuals and text. And I think this is maybe even a benefit compared to oral presentations. It allows us to meet and speak informally with interested viewers, facilitating really a great exchange of ideas and also networking opportunities. And this is, as I said before, maybe even more than with oral presentations. I think especially for young early career researchers, poster presentations often are really the first opportunity for young investigators to present their work. And it's also preparatory for a publication later on in a peer-reviewed journal. I will discuss about this in my last slide. We have seen this before, but really keep in mind now everybody should know the orientation, everything about the posters. We have seen this before. So again, poster size, etc. Just have a look to the ISHLTv poster instructions, and I won't repeat all of those details now again. But I think now it's really important to distinguish a little bit what we have seen before about the content of original research. And I would like to focus now a little bit more on how to present the clinical case report poster. As we have seen before on the left-hand side, original research, we have seen this now, has a title, authors, background, hypothesis, method, results, and so on. If we have a look on the right-hand side to a clinical case report poster, we can see there are some slightly differences. So again, title and authors, that's clear, but you should have a sort of an introduction, and the introduction should really describe actually the context of the case, and it should explain really the relevance and the importance why you're doing this. Then a case summary, and I would like to talk more about what a case summary entails in my next slide, and also a discussion, and I will also focus on what you should include in your discussion of a poster, including a clinical case. If needed, you could add references and acknowledgements. I would say for a case report, that's maybe not 100% necessary, but as required by ISHLT, please include your disclosures if you have any relevant disclosures. So what is a case summary? When you describe a case, follow the basic rules of medical communication. You're all specialists in your field. So first of all, include the history. So what is the history of your patient? What are the underlying diseases, etc.? And then for your case, what did you do? What was the physical examination? And then the next step, what have your investigative studies been? What did you do that you finally ended up to sum up this really interesting case report for ISHLT? And what was the progress of your patient? And last but not least, really, really important in our field, what was the outcome of the procedure or the new method you included in your case report? So the discussion, I think it's important to include also on your slides, or sorry, on your poster, what clinical decisions were made. That's important for others. And what can others learn from this case? How can you maybe treat your patients in a better way based on this case report, or maybe to conduct future really original research projects, so really bigger studies? And always keep in mind that the best clinical case report posters are those that make a few key points, and even if it's just one, really clearly. That's really important, and even if it's just one. So we have seen some posters already before, and here you can see actually how such a case report poster could look like. And I would like to highlight again, you can see here on the right hand side some issues. First of all, you can see avoid clutter. So it's really important to limit your poster, as I said before, to few main ideas and to present really a few findings well than everything what you have done. That's not possible. As you can see here, arrange your components from left to right and from top to bottom. That's important. Emphasize really important points by lines or boxes or arrows. Keep the lettering simple. So use no more than 3 different font sizes. That's important. Words composed of really all uppercase letters are difficult to read, you will see. The smallest font you should use actually should be approximately 24-point font, because you can read this from a distance of approximately 3 to 5 feet. And I think smaller is not a good thing on your poster. Keep the colors also simple. If you have too much color on your poster, this can be distracting. So on the other hand, if you have just a little bit of color, this can be boring and lifeless. So it must be somewhere in between. I brought here some examples from our institute, but what I really like, some case reports, which I found in the web. So you can see here clearly having a background, the case description, the systems review, sort of a timeline. So what was the progress of the patient, and also the outcomes, central figures, which is in both posters here included. Always a case description, some background, here even some take-home messages, and as I said before, if needed, acknowledgements and the references, which is not a must. So, but now let's have a look to this year. So there are also examples of really bad scientific posters available, and you can see here why this poster is actually terrible. First of all, clearly too much text. The background image is distracting. Text box, you can see here, dark and gray, so that's not really good. The text boxes have different widths. They are really hard to follow. So also aim that you have maximum of 45 to 65 characters per line. Otherwise, it's again distracting. Text boxes should have some white space, although it's not here white, but at least a minimum of white space in between. And also the edges should be somehow aligned, because again, otherwise it's distracting. This is text justified, which of course I think causes bad interword spacing. But there is more on this poster. As you can see, the title word art is distracting. It's hard to follow. The author font, as you can see here, is too loud compared to the rest. Results are presented in sentences, and there are no charts or any tables. Section headers, as you can see here, have too much format, so they're font bolded, they're underlined, etc. Just choose one, that's enough. Of course, on the left-hand side here, this terrible graphic of a guinea pig. So you should really include your own setup or your own procedure, what you have done in your clinical case. At At least in my opinion, I think including an abstract on the case report poster is not necessary because the poster is an abstract. So you don't need to have your entire abstract on your poster. And if you haven't seen this and you're preparing your poster, there is a nice publication. You can read this, which is summarizing most of what we have heard also today. So a sort of 10 simple rules of how to create a good poster presentation. Just quickly, you can see again what Sarah said right at the beginning, also define your purpose. And I think that's relevant for a case report if you are young at the beginning. Would like to engage a discussion about the content? What do you want? Do you want to collaborate on this? Or maybe just that people learn enough about this and then go off and try it maybe in their hospitals. Sell your work in 10 seconds. So you see at ISHLTv, we have hundreds of posters. So it's really hard that everybody can see every poster. That's not possible. The title is important. Keep in mind your poster has not been endorsed. It's just accepted. So it's also on you that it's endorsed. Similar rules to writing a paper. So again, identify the audience. Distill information, don't lose the core message. Layout and format, critical. We have seen it before. The content is important, so be concise. A poster should show your personality. And last but not least, and I think especially if you are an early stage researcher, ensure presenter and audience is interacting. And the visitor, I think, more likely remembers you than the content. And maybe this is your new boss or whatever, or your new university. So really make a good poster presentation. So you could fight for your attention. You could do the extra mile if you want. So as you can see here, if you are obsessive, compulsive, have a large wardrobe, you could try to choose your clothes matching to your poster. But please, if you are colorblind, maybe ask somebody. If your poster is maybe not located in the perfect spot, just go mobile and take your poster with you. I'm just kidding. So last but not least, after the poster presentation is before the publication. And I think that's really for young researchers, the most relevant part. So, and also for us here to mentor trainees in poster presentations is important. We should never underestimate the significance of presenting a poster at the ISHLT annual meeting. It's really important. And keep in mind, there are several studies demonstrating the importance of research abstracts initially presented as a poster. Across all the medical specialties, you can see here, based on the study, 34 to 70% of the posters presented at meetings were afterwards published in a peer-reviewed journal. And abstracts which have been selected for a poster presentation have also higher rates of publication than abstracts which have not been accepted for a meeting. Posters also have similar rates of publication, time to publication, and journal impact factor as oral presentations. So a poster obviously seems to be an important step for the dissemination of scientific work and for the development of early career presenters. Thank you very much for your attention.
Great. Well, thank you to all presenters today. I think we have some time for questions if anyone wants to unmute and ask a question to any of our presenters.
Maybe, Brittany, I don't have a question, but I can share one additional tidbit for people that maybe have oral presentations. I had asked Juliet, but one of the nice things is that at ISHLT, you'll have the ability to share yours in presenter format, which means that you can include little notes for yourself. So if you are a little nervous and you're afraid you're going to forget some key points in your presentation, you can embed those in the notes section in PowerPoint. And maybe Melissa could share if there's a similar option in Canva, but I know at least that PowerPoint offers that as an option. So at least you have that as a kind of a security blanket, so to speak, in case you're worried that you might forget.
That's great. That is actually a question that I had for you planned. So that's perfect to know that. While other people, I guess, are maybe thinking of questions, another question that I have for you, Sarah, is what kind of is the difference between these mini oral presentations that are 5 minutes versus the longer presentations that are going to be 10 minutes? What would you recommend cutting for the 5 minutes or expanding on for the 10 minutes?
I think for the minis, you have to be very careful on the slide content. So you maybe can only pick 1 or 2 figures, maybe 1 or 2 tables, versus if you have a longer period of time, you can delve into much more detail and kind of some sub-analyses for your presentation. So I would make sure that you first of all know what the key points are that you're trying to convey, and then make sure that you get those for the mini. And if you have more time, then you can add in additional details. So maybe that's where you can go through, 5 bullet points of conclusions instead of 1 or 2.
Great, thank you.
I know we're focusing on abstract oral presentations, but I do see some people on the call today that are going to be giving symposium presentations as well. And I think just something to note that ISHLT is doing some different types of symposium presentations this year, which do require, a certain number of slides, a certain amount of time spent on each slide, et cetera. So bringing some variety to the symposium presentation. So just be sure if you received an invitation for a symposium-based oral presentation, you're attending to these new formats that ISHLT is trying out this year, which I think will be really fun for all of us.
Melissa, I wanted to ask you, do you have any tips about actually transporting the posters to the conference? What would you recommend?
Oh gosh, I wish I had that figured out. So I will say, I tend to, my tips are this, kind of work with other people, perhaps from your institution that may also be bringing posters to ISHLT, and see if you can collapse them all into one tube for, one really wonderful volunteer to bring, and then you all, reimburse them with lunch. Perhaps mail that tube ahead of time. I have been places where ISHLT does not have poster printing on site, but you can have it printed nearby sometimes at FedEx or different places. I've only done that when the conference has printing on site, because it's I think more of a guarantee. So some people do try that. And then lastly, I haven't done it myself yet. But there are new poster printing companies that actually print foldable or fabric posters. And so you can still do it in the same, sizes. Costs are actually not too much different from having them, printed in the traditional format, but you would then be able to fold them and pack them in a suitcase. So I tend to try to work together with other colleagues and see if one will bring it one way and one will bring it the other way, or ship it ahead of time, to our hotel location.
Melissa, I did have a foldable poster, a material one, and I just took an iron once I got to the conference and checked in and ironed it, and it was perfect. So they work great.
On the topic of posters, Melissa, I know you were one of the discussants that walked around and looked at posters last year. What were you seeing more of? Are you seeing more of the traditional versions, or are you seeing a lot of people doing more of the visual abstract that you were talking about?
Oh, good question. I think we still tended to be heavier on the traditional side, although more visual abstracts are popping up. And I found myself, personally very much drawn to the personal abstracts, especially as a discussant trying to get through everything in the poster hall. It was easier for me to kind of quickly identify what the poster was about and engage the author about it. So, I think in the examples I gave, there was one that was very traditional poster. There was one that was very visual abstract. And then there was one that was like a combination of the two. So pending kind of where your comfort level lies, I think there are examples, across this, across that space in terms of testing out what you're comfortable with. If even able to just make a larger section about your kind of take home point. Perhaps you don't have the clip art or the visual abstracts, but you really highlight your take home point in a bigger way than your other sections. I think that can be a really nice way to draw the discussant, to your poster.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question?
Hi there. I have a small question. This is my first time going to the conference, so I don't know how big is the audience or how many people are talking.
So from my experience, the different rooms have different sizes. I think to Christiane's point, going to your room in advance, once you check in to get a sense of, are you assigned to a larger room or a smaller room, will be helpful. So you get a sense of, does this look like it has 100 chairs or 500 chairs or 50? That'll give you a sense of it. And you also don't know how many people are going to show up until the time of your presentation. So I think the best bet is probably just to go to the room and check it out in advance. And then that will at least give you an idea. I don't know if others have thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I agree. At my first ISHLT meeting, I was a little overwhelmed at looking at how big some of the rooms are. And you might even get a smaller room and it could be standing room only. So you really don't know. Be prepared for anything.
Yeah.
Like we have 2 minutes if anyone else has a question.
I would say I love Sarah's suggestion to look at folks' foreheads instead of their eyes. I'm going to remember that for my next presentation.
Just a thought for Gabriela. So if it's your first presentation, perhaps go up to the moderators, introduce yourself, and tell them that this is your first presentation, and perhaps specifically for the discussion section. If you have trouble to understand the question from the audience, they might help to translate it for you.
That's great. Thank you very much.
That actually brings up a good point. Does anyone have any tips on, I think that the part that we all probably get most nervous about is that Q&A after, because you never know what to expect. Do you have any tips for if someone asks a question that you don't know how to answer?
Tell them that's an excellent question and you could discuss this maybe later on in a private discussion with a coffee or whatever. That's an option. I mean, I wouldn't say like just anything. That's not a good option. Yeah. Or maybe sometimes it's even okay if you say, I have no idea.
Right.
I think we tend to not doing this, but yeah, you can't know everything.
Or sometimes you can say, I don't know, what have you done at your center? It'd be helpful to know what people are doing at other centers.
That's great. Okay, I think we're at the end of our webinar here. Thank you everyone for joining us today. This will be recorded if you want to go back and listen again, or if anyone wasn't able to make it today. But thank you again to all of our presenters. This was really helpful as we prepare for ISHLT in April and then all future conferences. So thanks for joining us today.